Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Long Dark Nights podcast. I'm Kirk.
And I'm Jitwire. Thank you all so much for joining us. And we would also like to introduce Toastybits for this very special episode.
Hello, thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. Wonderful to have you here. And gonna say hello to chat real quick. It seems like we already have a lot of people in. So hello, Elijah, Pyro, Volcano, I'll be the one, Grape Nut, Cupcake. And I think that's everyone so far. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Even though I already said that.
So today go ahead. Good.
Yeah, so today we're going to be covering Wintermute episode 3. So if you guys have any questions or anything like that, make sure to drop them in the chat, and we'll, if we can stop while Toasty is explaining it to us, we will, and if not, we'll get them at the end. But Toasty, I will hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. Just to bring this up again, I've been sick for like the last 2-ish weeks, so my voice is mostly back to normal, but I'm still a little stuffy, and I might cough occasionally. So apologies for that ahead of time. Welcome everyone, and today we're going to be discussing episode 3, like Jitwire stated. And for this episode, we are shifting perspectives. We're now going to be viewing the journey through Wintermute, but through the perspective of Astrid Greenwood, who is a doctor and the former wife of, or ex-wife is the proper term, of Will Mackenzie, who was the protagonist of the first 2 episodes. And so where episode 3 starts is actually, I believe it's the night or the morning right after the plane crash and the first flare. So it's kind of like when Will is also waking up and making his way to Greymother's house. Astrid is unfortunately dying very slowly in the snow, and I believe the location that she's dying in is supposed to be the tunnel collapse over in Keeper's Pass south. But in game, one thing I did notice, which was very interesting, that cutscene doesn't match what we see in survival mode, because I believe Keeper's Pass South wasn't created until they added Blackrock, which was over 2 years later. So they kind of recreated that entire area from scratch. And Astrid was able to make her way through the tunnel collapse in Milton, and then the other one in Keeper's Pass, and was slowly bleeding out and also freezing to death and collapsed at some point. Luckily, she was found by this, what I call the Corvid Guardian, which I find very interesting that it comes up in episode 3 as sort of like a guide, essentially, through the Quiet Apocalypse. Very similar to how Methuselah has, or is like the guide for Will, in a way, for the Quiet Apocalypse. The Corvid Guardian is like the equivalent for Astrid. It's still a mysterious being we don't really know much about, but what I believe it's a raven. It's not a crow like the other birds in the game that we see, because it makes a different sound, but it alerts a nearby survivor, and that survivor ends up being Molly, and she was out hunting, like she states a little bit later, and rescues Astrid. So she was very lucky. She was on the brink of death and got saved by this Corvid Guardian and Molly. If not, we don't know what would have happened, but I guarantee you Astrid would have died without their help. And the story of Wintermute would probably be altered, very different, and who knows what would have happened. But that's not the story that Hinterland wanted us to play through, of course. Of course, the bird had to be there, and Molly as well. I think Pyro's saying it's not. I don't think it's a crow, because it doesn't sound the same. That's why I call it a corvid, because that's the type of bird. It's like a classification, I believe. So I just call it the Corvid Guardian. because you'll see it throughout the game, and even in the side quests, it appears suddenly, and it's kind of like directing Astrid to points of interest, which is very cool.
Kind of like a divine intervention in a way.
Yeah, in a way, and it's actually something I want to cover in a video very soon. The Corvid Guardian. So then fast forward, according to Molly, it's a few days, or at least, or I think Father Thomas. It's a few days later. So at this point, I think Will has already been captured by the prisoners, and as she would later learn, the prisoners have been in the valley for a little while. So Astrid would awaken and be greeted by her rescuer, Molly, and she would they would converse with each other and, discuss the situation with Astrid, her injuries, and what's going on outside. There's, really bad weather. There's wolves that are a little more dangerous than normal, and the power's out. And, some of those things seem pretty normal. Like, the people on the island are used to power being out. We're still on the point where I think most people don't understand what is happening with the auroras and the power are not natural. So they I think are all used to it by now, being on the island. And then I believe there's like a brief period where Astrid goes back to sleep and then wakes up again. And this is where they actually start talking about each other, who Molly is, who Astrid is. Astrid explains that she's a research doctor, and Molly is sort of, she kind of skirts around the details about her past. And during their conversation, Astrid asks something that triggers Molly, and it is related to some things that Molly is hiding, and we'll learn that later. But she asks about her husband because she assumed that she had a husband because of the size of the house, which is, kind of a dangerous thing to ask. Even if you're a woman, asking another woman about that, it's a little risky. It's kind of like
very presumptuous.
Knocking them down. Yeah, it's knocking them down a peg there. To assume that Molly wouldn't be capable of having a house like that. And that kind of triggers her and causes her to, get a little mad and leaves. And she ends up locking the door. She actually did it the night before, and Astrid asked why. So she locks the door. I don't think it's because Molly had bad intentions. I think, and what I find really interesting is that the lock is on the outside of the house, which I think it ties into her whole marital situation that we learn later on. Why there's a lock on the outside it's like a padlock, I believe. It's a little concerning. And so Astrid's now locked in the house alone, and you can explore the house, but eventually Molly calls and asks for help. She's attacked by wolves. The wolves are more aggressive now because of the post-first flare effects. And in the process of finding what Molly needed in the basement, Astrid runs into her husband's corpse. You'll learn that it's her husband later on, but it's the man that's in the picture with Molly in the house. And that was not unintended. Molly told her not to look around, where she wasn't supposed to. That was due to an earthquake, and this is where we get introduced to the earthquakes, which is interesting. After that, she makes her way to the barn with the revolver and ammo, and finds that Molly has already escaped. She had bought what looks like a Timberwolf. I think it is supposed to be a Timberwolf because that's when they get introduced. She found her bow, killed the wolf, and escaped before Astrid could even get there. I think this is one of the things about the game at this point that people didn't really like, is the whole telephone usage in the game. Like, it doesn't make sense if you miss the explanation for why it works. And it's kind of like a cheap way of creating dialogue between characters, but there's no physical character there. It's kind of jarring because it's very well, it's scripted out so that you arrive at the location and then the phone is ringing. the person that's calling doesn't know when you're going to answer and doesn't know where you're going to answer from. So it's a little odd. It's one of those technologies that we're not used to anymore because it's an older type of phone system. Doesn't require electricity. It's like ancient technology to us nowadays. And yeah, Astrid receives the call from the barn, which is the phone that Molly had used previously. And she asks about the corpse. And then, of course, Molly gets triggered again, is rather upset, but doesn't realize that how Astrid had found out. She was just assuming that she was poking around in her business and told her to just to mind her own business, essentially. And then they stop the call there. And that's more or less the end of the first chapter. It's very brief, just like an introduction to Molly, and then you're fully free to explore Pleasant Valley at that point. And then she just on the phone, she finds like a piece of paper tucked in. It's a pamphlet for the community center at Thompson's Crossing. So that's what leads her to go that way. And that would be the start of chapter 2.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So just looking at chat here. So we do have a few questions about chapter 1.
Yeah.
And so Pyro is saying no, because at the end of the episode, you talked to Will on the radio. So is the timeline messed up a little bit? Because you were saying...
Oh, yes, you're right. Yeah, Will, the radio call for Will hasn't happened yet. So yeah, she'd be waking up probably around the time he arrives in Mystery Lake. My bad.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
I think episode 2 and 3, the gameplay parts line up, but Astrid collapsing out on the other side of the tunnel, and her rescue, that would be lining up with episode 1, essentially. She'd be resting during episode 1 when she gets up and starts exploring the valley. That's, I think, when episode 2 is taking place. Yeah, my bad. You're totally right.
Awesome. Well, thanks for pointing that out, Pyro.
Yes, thank you.
And I'll be the one, says Molly reminds me of Kathy Bates in the movie Misery. She seems possessive.
But I think she was also subject to the same type of lockdown. She was a captive in her own right. And
that's why, I find the padlock on the outside of the door kind of suspicious. It kind of points to some sort of... She might have been straight up locked into the house by herself, by her husband at some point.
Yeah.
And she's just using it to keep Astrid safe, because not only are there prisoners about and she knows about them, I think she would have known about them by then. But there's also wolves, so she's trying to keep her safe. But the padlock being there is very suspect. But that's not a normal thing. You normally would have it on the inside.
Yep. Yep. And also want to say hello to Faye and Pickle Lil. Thank you both so much for joining us. And Pickle Lil is saying my copper telephone line only just got removed in real life. Wow.
Yeah, well. Yeah, in some places that stuff still exists. It's just
not so much in the US anymore.
And there is a lore reason for why it's still in use on Great Bear Island. Episode 4, I think Franklin says something about how, like, when the satellite phones are down, they still use the old rotary phones. So it's in place because the satellite's phones are still unreliable there.
Yeah.
And the old rotary phones do not require real electronics. It's all mechanical.
Pyro does say, we talked to Father Thomas physically. That's true, but Father Thomas doesn't move around. Molly does. So it's their way of working around that. Same with Jace. They're both moving around a lot in the world. We don't see them while they're doing that. So that's what the phone call is for, to work around that. And I think it's fine. It works. It's just a little jarring when you arrive at a burnt house on the riverside and the phone is ringing, almost as if it's scripted. But I mean, it is coding wise, but
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad they kind of explained that about the phone system, because I was a little taken aback by that at first until they explained it. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes a bit more sense. So
Yeah. All right, we can move on then if we have no more major questions here. Chapter 2. So at this point, you're free to roam around. You can run into a lot of side quests here and there. But we can focus on we should focus on Wintermute first, and then we can go into the side quests at the end. So chapter 2 is actually really a big chunk of this episode. It's, I would say, maybe like 40 to 50% of the whole episode. And it starts with you arriving at the community hall in Thompson's Crossing. You can see like the smoke coming out of a bonfire outside. And inside you'll see Father Thomas, the only person standing, and I believe the only remaining resident from the town, despite what he says. He tells you that there should be at least half a dozen people from the town, but they are nowhere to be found. So I don't know where they went. And then on the floor is a bunch of people that are dying, sick, dehydrated. They have some sort of trauma from the plane crash. Father Thomas mistakes Astrid for a plane crash victim, which is true, she was, but she wasn't part of that plane crash. And that crash would have happened the night of the first flare, the same time Will and Astrid's plane fell down. And so over the course of the few days since then, the victims would have come over to the community hall, and unfortunately not all of them survive. So I think I had someone recently ask me why we can't go in the cellar at the community hall, and I think it's because it's locked and full of corpses, because that's where Father Thomas said he put the corpses of the people that didn't make it, because they can't be buried in the winter when the ground is frozen. It would be nice to be able to go in there, but I understand why there is a lore reason for that cellar to be closed or locked. And so, yeah, they talk a little bit about the night of the crash and what's happened with all the victims, the living ones and the dead ones. And because she's a doctor, she offers her medical services, and so Astrid does her thing. She goes around and asks everyone what if they need anything. She gives them water if they're dehydrated, and then she finds one survivor that unfortunately has diabetes and requires insulin. I don't remember which type that is. I think is that type 2 or type 1? Type 2. So he needs insulin, and Graper Island probably doesn't have any. I don't think anyone with insulin would stay on the island. It wouldn't make sense. It'd be like a life and death situation. So Father Thomas really can only think of the one source being at the plane crash. And so she's would depart to go to the plane crash, but on the before he could do that, or she could do that, he asks her to find mementos for the dead, because what he can do while she's out in the world doing the physical labor, he can do the mental labor, giving therapy to the survivors, because a lot of them are going to be feeling survivor's guilt and sorrow for what happened, and they need all the help they can get. So not only do they need food, water, and shelter, they need physical, or they need emotional therapy, and that's what he's there for. And not only is he a priest, he can offer religious services, but he can also console them as well. And so from there, Astrid would depart, but before that, Molly calls again. This is going to happen a lot, and I do kind of, again, I find it kind of jarring how it's like timed perfectly, but that's kind of how the game works. Because game, like I always say. it makes sense because game. She calls and she not only offers her some a gift for helping her with the wolves, which you can collect afterwards, but she asks if she's going to go help the survivors, and Astrid has to, because it's her Hippocratic oath. She's a doctor, so she has to. And I don't remember too much about that second conversation other than that, just asking her if she's going to go help, and then providing the gift. And then, jumping forward, there's nothing going on in between the community center and the plane crash, it's just a lot of exploring. At the plane crash, you can find all of the IDs, you can find the passenger manifest, you can find the various corpses, and then one lone survivor. And so she was able to rescue that one survivor. And then the middle of this, I thought this was very cool, is a cutscene that, and I talked about this in the last podcast, is technically the prelude to Wintermute. It happens before the plane ride, before her conversation with Will, and it kind of reveals something very important about why she needed to go to Great Bear Island, what's in the hard case, and why she was so insistent on not asking questions about why she needed to go out there. And this leads into what's going on with Perseverance Mills. So in episode 2, Will learns or hears that there's a quarantine going on in Perseverance Mills, and we don't know how long it's been happening. In episode 3, in that Seraphim cutscene is what I call it. It's like a interlude cutscene, which is this technically happens before Wintermute starts. Astrid's at work at the Seraphim Research Center, and she receives a phone call. And that phone call is from someone in Perseverance Mills who's very concerned because there is some kind of situation going on there with this quarantine, and she's very concerned more about one specific person. I'm guessing it's someone that they know personally that they're scared for. But she's asking, please get the cure out here fast. We need it to be here now. And Astrid's doing everything she can. She can't just take it because it's in a laboratory. And they end the conversation there. And I think it kind of alludes to the fact that the hard case has the cure to whatever is happening in Perseverance Mills. And at this point, we still don't know what it is. And she likely stole it and became a fugitive because of it. Probably unemployed as well. So that's why when she arrives at Will's hangar, she's kind of in a panic. She's asking him to do something very dangerous, to take her somewhere far away where no one goes. And she wants him to ask no questions about it. And that would require a lot of trust for him to actually say yes, and he did. Which demonstrates that their relationship, while it's not in a great position, they still trust each other enough to do these crazy things for each other. And then that flashback ends, and we return back to episode 3, and she continues her efforts to rescue the survivor at the plane, and moves down she's on Skeeter's Ridge. It's like that whole area up there. She has to go downhill with the survivor, and arrives at a burnt down cabin. I believe it was probably burned down due to an electrical fire or something. Although I don't know how electricity would get out there. Probably like an underground cable or something. And the phone miraculously is in one piece and is ringing. Again, very jarring, but Molly explains it doesn't matter where she's at or where she's calling from. As long as the phone is ringing, she'll eventually pick up somewhere. She just doesn't know where. And but she does say that she was kind of spying on her while she was rescuing the survivor, which is kind of suspicious. But yeah, these conversations just kind of reveal a little bit more and more about what's going on with Molly and why, she's suspicious about Astrid asking about her husband, why her husband is dead. I believe this is when she mentions how she was killed by her husband was killed by wolves, and that she let it happen. So we start to piece together the real story behind how her husband died, and whether she's a murderer or not. But she makes it a point later on that she isn't, but there's a big question about, do you consider it murder if you let it happen, if you had the ability to stop it? It's kind of a moral question. And then fast forward, Astrid's back at the community hall with the survivor, administers the insulin, gives out the IDs as a way to help the living console them over the passing of their loved ones and friends. And that, I think, would be the end of chapter 2. It's a big chunk of that episode.
Yeah, no.
But yeah.
Something I could throw in here, and this,
Mhm.
this again, this I love to say this because it kind of shows my age, but the phone line systems, and this will be something a lot of younger people won't understand. What's going on with the phone line system is something that I actually grew up with, and it's called a party line. And in other words, you shared a phone line, a hard line, with neighbors in your neighborhood, especially in rural areas. When I grew up in a very rural area. There's not a lot of infrastructure. So the phone company would run a single line and you'd share it amongst 3 or 4 people. So when the phone rang, it rang to everybody and you picked it up and somebody was looking for somebody else or what have you, or you'd pick up the phone to go use it and somebody was already talking on it. So it was a very weird and unusual time, but this was back in the early 70s when technology wasn't what it is today, and you still called an operator to get long distance to call on the other side of the world and things like that. So it's a much different time frame, but to give some kind of a context to why the phone system was the way it was, is she was just calling all the phones. It wasn't like she knew exactly. She kind of knew where she was, but she was calling all the phones. So to give some kind of context to that deal.
Yeah, and that would answer Elijah's question. Yeah, if you picked up the phone and someone else was calling, you'd be able to hear everyone on that call.
Yes.
So that reminds me, in episode 2, when you're at the hunting lodge getting the spear, if you go to the basement and then come back upstairs, the phone starts ringing. And I believe that's one of the calls that Molly and Astrid are having. If Will had picked it up, or he had the ability to pick it up, he would have heard Astrid. But he didn't. That wasn't a mechanic then. It was just kind of like a minor jump scare, make you a little uneasy that the phone's working, but all the power isn't, nothing with electricity is working.
A peculiarity.
Yeah, that was, I think it was just an intended mini jump scare, essentially. Freak you out why the phone's ringing. But had he picked it up, he would have heard Astrid, and they could have figured out things from there. But no, that's not how things were intended to be then. Any questions here? I just see Just welcome. How are you doing? Let's see, any questions? My favorite part of episode 3 was the Pleasant Valley Tales. I love camping out to see the stag and fishing for the legend. I agree. That's a very cool part of episode 3. The side quests are very interesting. Are people asking about Dr. Frost?
Dr. Frost.
Yeah.
There's a story behind Dr. Frost, and one of these days we'll share it with you.
I don't, Castle, it's not that Molly knew when to call her, it's that she would call and just wait until Astrid picked up. It's very likely that she was waiting for several minutes, if not hours, but who knows?
And again, the phone system is old school, so it would ring and ring and ring until you gave up. It wouldn't go to there was no such thing as voicemail or anything like that. It would just ring.
Eliza's asking about the ghost stag. You cannot kill the ghost stag, from what I can tell. I think Molly was following Astrid and keeping the wolves off her trail. Well, I don't know about that, because there were still wolves. And I played it recently, and I think we talked about it last time. Or maybe it was after the stream, or after the podcast. You can play the lowest difficulty for episode 3, and you get attacked by timberwolves for some reason. It might be a bug. But no, there's still wolves about, and they attack you. I don't think Molly's protecting her from the wolves. Molly's doing her own thing, and we'll get into that in chapter 3 here. Chapter 3 is very short, so we could go over that very quickly and then go into 4. So chapter 3 is, your only goal is to continue helping the survivors that remain, and the ones that are still missing. So the passenger manifest tells you there's 3 people missing still that haven't been found, whether they're still alive or not. and they also need food, supplies, medicine, etc. It's kind of like the Whiteout challenge, but like a miniature version of that, or like when you help Grandmother get supplies again. So yeah, there's plenty of supplies around, so Astrid could find it from pretty much anywhere. And Father Thomas has asked her, please find the survivors that are missing and bring them back if they're alive. And so that's pretty much it. That's all of chapter 3 is just gathering supplies and getting the few survivors. It's the part that a lot of people hate because of the tedious nature of escorting the survivors back, which slows you down, and then you get attacked by timberwolves in scripted attacks. Yeah, very annoying, but short chapter in a way. And then chapter 4, I think, starts when Astrid completes her tasks and talks to Father Thomas. And thanks to all of her work, they are able to maintain the survivors throughout the winter at the very least. Which by the end of winter, they should be ready to, you know, walk around, do whatever, and assist, gathering more supplies. But that's well into the future. But because of Astrid's help, they can at least survive. And I think it's very cool to see Astrid and Father Thomas, both from two very different worlds, doing everything they can for these survivors, which is why I love Father Thomas so much, because he's one of the few characters that are just morally good. Like, you know how there's like the character classification, like behind, like it's like the grid where there's like neutral, good, evil, and then like lawful, and forgot what the other end is. But Father Thomas would be straight up lawful good, essentially. He's truly like one of the most morally good characters in this game, and while he couldn't do everything that Astrid could do to help the survivors, he was there to give them shelter, to feed them, to keep them warm, to give them therapy, to help them pray if they wanted it. And he sacrificed a lot to keep these people alive. And Astrid, of course, did the things that he couldn't do, like going out, gathering supplies, risking her life against the weather. So their combined effort is amazing, what they were able to do. Two people from very different worlds. One was a doctor, one was a priest, saving so many lives.
He was kind of like a moral anchor.
Yeah, a moral anchor.
In the story.
Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, we have Molly, who... it's okay. And then on the other side, we have this moral anchor with Father Thomas, and then on the other side, we have this moral dilemma with Molly, who would later on call you a few more times and continue explaining what happened with her husband. So yeah, for her efforts, Father Thomas gives her a path forward, because she needs to get to Perseverance Mills, and at this point she hasn't heard about Will yet, but she just needs to keep going forward and get to Perseverance Mills. The normal path is blocked, so he gives her knowledge of an alternate path through the mine that used to be used for coal mining. And then from there, you're free to depart, but I think it's a persistent blizzard at that point, and you're free to now continue the episode and finish up any remaining side quests or whatever. But before you leave, Molly calls again, and this is when she asks, why would she risk her life for all of these people? These are strangers, and would they do the same thing for her if she were in their situation? It's again questioning her Hippocratic oath. Like, why would she do it? It's something she has to do because she's obligated to do it. But Molly doesn't understand that, and they're two women from very different worlds, essentially. And I talked about this in the Molly video, like who she really is. It's very interesting to see how they paired up Molly with Astrid being this educated, independent woman who has her career, versus Molly, who is married. She's in the traditional wife lifestyle, and very clearly she was being abused by her husband, and so she grew these regrets and this trauma from all that, and probably stunted her the idea of there being anything else. And she tells her, I don't remember if it was this last call at the community hall or if it was the final one at the radio station, but she tells her that she tells Astrid she wanted to be someone. She wanted to be more than just a farmhand's a farmer's daughter or a farmer's wife or whatever. She wanted to be someone, but she couldn't because of what her husband did to her. So that makes you question, did he physically or emotionally abuse her? And even Astrid asks, like, did he hurt her? And Molly answers, there are ways to hurt people that never heal. So that definitely means that he not only physically abused her, but emotionally, psychologically. She's scarred. She needed therapy or even counseling for marriage, but that never happened. And so she would eventually resent her husband and plot to kill him, but she could never do it because she wasn't brave enough to do it. And then the opportunity arose with the wolves and attacking him, which is what actually killed him, was the wolf attack that happened. It probably happened, if I had to guess, right before the first flare or the night of, but I don't know. And that was the thing that got her to finally realize what she wanted to do, like to get her revenge on men for their historical oppression against women. So she started killing, and you can find evidence of this all over the valley following the first chapter. After Trauma, the first chapter, you can see various corpses everywhere. Most of them, well, they're all prisoners, actually. It's just the prisoner corpses. And you don't know what's going on with them until Molly confesses later on that she had been killing all the prisoners while Astrid was going around rescuing people and risking her life for them, for complete strangers. So we have this moral dilemma of whether Molly's inaction was considered murder. And I think I would say, yeah, it is murdered, despite her not doing anything. She had the power to do something, and she froze and decided to let him die. And that was the, kind of like the event that triggered her ability to go ahead and kill for once by her, like on her own.
It was a tipping point.
Is the tipping point, essentially. Yeah.
Because she started to take her anger and years of abuse and frustration out on the prisoners wandering about and what have you. I was going to say something along the lines of, and I can't remember exactly how it's said, maybe somebody can correct me on it, but kind of along the lines of that thing of, if you teach somebody, nothing but a hammer, everything looks like nails, something along that lines. And that's kind of where I feel like this is where you're heading with that. And that all of a sudden, Molly just, it's like everything was bad. And she was going to correct the world for herself.
Yeah. And not that those prisoners didn't deserve that, but there is no justifying what she's doing. I will say that, though.
No.
They have that final conversation in the community hall, but that's not the last time they talk. So before they end that conversation, she tells her about the radio station, which is something she should have done before, but she explains why she didn't say it at first. Because she knew that she was looking for her friend, Will, and trying to find him. So the radio would have been helpful at the beginning, but it wouldn't have done her any good until later with the Auroras. But she did explain, and I thought this was a very sad moment, that she didn't tell her at first because she was kind of taking away the loneliness. And then she hangs up, which I thought was very, very sad, because in her now being widowed, and she's going around killing people. She has no one to talk to, and she has no one to confess to what she's doing. So there's some loneliness there, and she really needed that, and that's what Astrid is there for. And at the radio station, she goes and tries to use the radio. Doesn't work. I mean, at this point, we know that, but she doesn't. And so she rests the night, and Aurora lights the radio, and she was able to hear the exact same conversation we hear in episode 2. So this time, she can hear the people at Perseverance Mills and Will, but she can't communicate with either of them. So there's, I think, a distance thing going on. So Perseverance Mills, or Pleasant Valley would be closer to Perseverance Mills than Mystery Lake, I think. I believe by a little bit. So I think there's a problem with distance, but also, oh, actually, I guess that doesn't explain why Will can't hear Astrid, because they're not that far from each other.
I'm not sure she was transmitting properly because the way if they're using shortwave radio, they're bouncing it off the ionosphere. So distance does make a difference, but there's that bounce. I think a lot of it was just because she wasn't broadcasting properly. I mean, she was a doctor; she's not a radio engineer, so
and also, the radios they were using are vastly different. Will was using a old military radio hooked up to a bunch of random parts. She was using a proper radio station, but yeah, she probably didn't know how to use it properly. And again, when you listen to both conversations, it's the same thing, but the person at Perseverance Mills is not talking to either Will or Astrid. So there is someone else out there that they're talking to, which is very interesting. And I think might lead into what we will see in episode 5. Hopefully it comes up.
So the radio conversation was actually Will trying to contact Perseverance Mills, but the person that was replying wasn't talking to Will. They were talking to somebody else. And they were both just receiving a communication.
Yeah, a distress call. So they were asking for help from someone. At that point, we're basically wrapping up episode 3. Astrid gets that last call from Molly. She reinforces the fact that she's killing people. She killed the prisoner outside the radio station. She killed pretty much all the prisoners around the valley. She tells Astrid she doesn't regret it because, in her mind, she's justified. In the face of the law, she isn't. And, in morality, like with morals taken into account, she's not justified. But everyone's morals are different. And then she thanks Astrid for, she confesses to her and tells her that everything because she trusts her. She, I guess, gained trust for her over the course of their conversations. And thanks her for taking away the loneliness a little bit. And she asks if Will is one of the good ones, and she tells her more or less yes, that she wouldn't want to see him dead because of Molly. And so it's not that Molly is actively looking for people like Will. It's that she just, in her mind, thinks that all men are bad. So if she were to run into Will, it would be trouble for Will, but hopefully that doesn't happen. She has no intention to harm him, though, if she knew it was him. And then from there, at that point, you're just going to the mine. You get into the mine. There's an earthquake that takes you to an entirely different part of the mine. It's like underneath, and that actually leads you to the Aurora elevator that you can see in survival mode. And then she fixes that, escapes, and sees it's technically the scene when you exit the Aurora mine in survival mode. You're looking at the logging area, and it's completely different. And that's one of the big differences between Wintermute and survival mode. It's the same area, just completely different for this cutscene. And this is one of the most important cutscenes in the game. You can see giant, thank you, Castle, orcas, and they're all beached on the ice on the shore, along with a ship as well, I believe. And Astrid has this monologue about how she finally understands what's going on, that the world is changing. There's something to do with the Auroras, and she's worried about the survivors and everyone else that she left behind, how this new world will affect them, how it will change them. And I mean, we can already see that with Molly, although it was inevitable for her to become what she is now. She's within this new world, she's free to do whatever she wants to do, and if that involves killing men, whether they're innocent or not, there's nothing stopping her. And we can see that nature is definitely being affected by whatever's happening with the Auroras. She mentions that the weather's changing, although we don't really see that in game. I hope we can see that in Black Frost, that the climate is shifting, because if this is all to do with the sun, because that's the source of solar flares, which is what causes auroras, there's something strange going on with the sun. The sun is what drives climate or weather. So if there is some kind of solar event happening, the weather will change with that. So there will be a sudden climate shift. We don't see it in the Long Dark 1, but maybe we will see it in Black Frost. Some more freak weather events. And that's pretty much it. That's how episode 3 ends. She just moves forward and hopes for the best for the future, and continues on her way to Perseverance Mills.
Yeah, now mostly like what you were talking about with the solar events and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, and I'm not an astrophysicist by any stretch of the means, but I do believe that the mass coronal ejections tend to happen when there's high sunspot activities, which can also, have a cooling effect because of less activity, because it's a cold spot on the sun. So I wonder what when you're talking about the weather effects, if maybe this is sort of maybe the story is taking us towards like a mini ice age or in that direction.
It's a precursor to an extinction level event, for sure.
A slow motion.
Because nature is imbalanced. The magnetic field is definitely weaker. Communication is disrupted. The ionosphere is definitely not working properly. Electricity is generated by these auroras, so these are very high energy events. And if my estimated timing for the first flare is correct, it's 2022. So it's 10 years after the collapse, according to Grandmother. And we see various notes around Milton that kind of point to 2012 as the collapse. But we also know that the collapse is kind of like it's gradual. So I think 2012 is when it gets worse. It's like the tipping point for the world. So if it's 2022, we're actually not in a solar maximum at that point. So it's a 11-year cycle. We're in the peak for that right now, actually. I think we're passing the peak. Last year was a really big year for that as well. We had a lot of big coronal ejection events that caused auroras as far south as like the central US and Europe. I was able to see an aurora for the first time here in the Midwest ever. Using my phone camera, I was barely able to see it. These events are normally they happen, but when these solar peaks happen every 11 years, it's when the activity is the strongest. If we're in 2012, we're not even in a solar peak yet. We're ramping up to it, but the first flare is definitely just a freak storm. So powerful that it was able to wipe out all electronics for the most part. So there is certainly something more going on with the sun. I did talk with the astrophysics friend, and he did tell me that I talked about this in my video called What is Wintermute? That in order for a lot of these things to make sense, the sun has to be going through some kind of end of life cycle. It would make the most sense. And that doesn't mean that the sun is about to blow up and the earth is going to be gone. This takes millions of years to happen. So this is kind of like the first stage of the sun dying. And that's where I believe the game is going towards, but that's not what the games are going to be about. The Long Dark and the future of the franchise is going to be about the stories of the survivors, about the struggle of survival. We're not going to be talking about the sun blowing up anytime soon, because that's not going to happen in any of these games. It's just the premise for that leads into this apocalypse. And again, we don't know yet, but that's what I believe. That's what my friend believes, and he understands the science behind the sun. And,
Yeah, because if the sun isn't going to explode, it's going to expand.
Yeah,
And
and that takes a
then-
long time.
yeah,
It'll be
it's a-
many millions of years before that
Yeah,
happens.
It's a slow process, and something too with the apocalyptic part of this is that it's not this cataclysmic nuclear exchange where everything dies at once. It is a like you said, an extinction level event
Yeah.
where it's slow and kind of drawn out.
In my video, what is Wintermute? I think I said specifically that the first flare has rewritten the rules of survival. So that means every creature, every animal, every plant, humans, fish, everything needs to adapt or it's going to die slowly. And that includes our use of technology and stuff like that.
A paradigm shift,
Yeah.
to say the
we're-
least.
Mhm. Basically, we've hit a point the first flare is like a point where evolution now needs to drive everything towards adaptation, or that means death. But yeah, humans are very versatile though, so I don't think it's gonna be a case where Black Frost The Lone Dark 2 ends where humans all die. I mean, that's not what they want. They want to keep the franchise alive for many years and do more than just games. So there's plenty of room for many stories for them to tell. This isn't going to end where humans are dying. I think humans would die off well before the sun in real life would eventually consume the earth. So we're just here along for the ride while the earth slowly dies or evolves, essentially.
Ebbs and flows.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think we can take questions for however long we want to go, and I don't mind going for as long as you guys want to go.
Yeah, and if you haven't heard Jitwire's voice, there's a reason behind it. She's kind of had a very strange emergency at her house, and she's taking care of that. So if we're still on and she pops back in, that'll be great. But I don't know that we're going to have her back, and maybe next week, well, she can talk about it. But at this point, I'm not at liberty to say what happened. But she's had a little bit of an emergency. It's nothing life-threatening or anything like that. Just kind of an odd event that happened at home. So if you're not hearing her voice, that's why.
I did see Humble Track join a little bit ago.
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello, Humble. Thank you.
Hello. I don't know how to say that. Penace Cupcake. Welcome. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. So we can take any questions about Wintermute in general. Also, if you guys want to ask questions about side quests, go ahead. Because I think some people were asking about that.
Yeah, episode 3 was one of my favorites for the side quest because I love the little thing with the little mystery animals, the thing with the fish and the Bigfoot and the ghost stag and all that stuff. I thought that was kind of creative.
Yeah,
because those are kinds of stories that you would hear, you know, with people that live in the forest and things like that. So that lore, and
that's something I'm exploring at the moment for my next several videos, several lore videos, all the tall tales and other mysteries in the game.
I did see something here that was talking about, and I don't know who it is without going back and looking, but somebody was talking about would they see Molly in episode 5, and
yeah,
I think there's going to be a lot of people that get left behind, and whether Molly's there or Father Thomas or grandmother and all that stuff, you got the unfortunate thing of what we're talking about in an apocalyptic kind of event. People are going to get left behind, and it's going to be survival of the fittest.
Yeah, I talked about this in my predictions video for episode 5. For sure, we know that Will and Astrid are coming back. Jace, Mathis, Atwood would finally appear for the first time, and Jane, who is the female in Perseverance Mirrors in the final cutscene of episode 4.
Who was
Those are the
also the
only-
phone call.
Yeah, she was in the phone call with Astrid at Seraphim. Those are the only returning characters, for sure, that are coming back. Oh, and Vakon and Heller, for sure. Those will be the only guaranteed ones that are coming back. Of the previous characters that were in the other episodes, I think Jeremiah would make the most sense, because he is tied to Atwood, and it sounded like he might return, after he takes care of his personal matter and heals a little bit. I think he's the most likely character to return, and if he does, it would be great to see him come back at a pivotal moment, say the conclusion to Will's conflict with Mathis. It would be good timing. Molly is actually a contender for coming back because she's actively following and taking down the prisoners. Even in episode 4, at the very beginning, Heller and Vakon were talking about a bow wielding killer, and that's Molly. She was straight up following them through Keeper's Pass. And I think there's a note in survival mode at the prison that kind of points to there being the mysterious person following someone to the prison, but this would be after the prison was destroyed and the prisoners would leave. So who knows if that's Molly, but I think she is a strong contender for returning as well. Of everyone else, I think it's up in the air, but Grey Mother for sure is probably stuck there. Unless they can get like dozens of people all the way across the island with equipment to remove the avalanches, then they could rescue her. But who knows what'll happen. We still don't know what's going on with the whole outbreak and all that, and the ship. There's a lot that's going to happen. So it's all dependent on what they want to do. But for sure, Grey Mother and Father Thomas and the crash survivors are stuck there.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Jeremiah showed up because of the Atwood relationship. Just was just saying, not sure if this has been talked about or not, but how was Jeremiah connected to Atwood? So you would think Jeremiah would be mentioned at least in that.
Yeah, he might be mentioned by Atwood for sure. It'll come up in conversation. We don't know their connection yet, but because of Jeremiah's military connection or clear connection, and Atwood working at a former government facility, there's a chance that they worked together when he was in the military and she was working for the government. It's a possibility. We just don't know yet. But they definitely worked on something in the past that would lead them to knowing what Wintermute is, whatever it is, which I believe is a code word for whatever's happening. And they would both know the code word and the response to that. So they definitely worked in like government military adjacent fields, essentially.
Kind of like the thing you'd hear on a spy movie with, if I were to say this phrase, how would you respond? And it's supposed to be a canned response to match, kind of thing. But yeah, I tend to agree with you on that and this comes around to the thing that you kind of overly go over and over again about, and it is said so much in the game, is trust. Atwood and Jeremiah had some kind of dealings in the past, and there is trust that they have with what's going on and, whatever he's doing. Because he's out in the field and she's at the research station.
Someone needs a recap on what's happening here. You can watch the VODs of these podcasts or listen to them. Is this on Spotify?
We do put them on Spotify, and it takes about 24 hours for YouTube to go through and add all the chat in, and then it takes about another 24 hours for either Jitwire or I to we trim basically the front and the back of it, and then we put it up on Spotify. So generally, Spotify is usually about Tuesday or Wednesday.
And having the chat on the video is actually very helpful if they can't see the chat yet.
Yeah.
On the side.
So that's why we put that. That's why the chat box is on the video, and for that first 24 hours, and then after that, you can actually read the YouTube one. But either one, at least lets you kind of see what's going on with all that. But yeah, this will be ready to go as soon as we get done, essentially.
Definitely catch up. And leave a 5-star rating on the Spotify version of this.
Please and thank you. We want to keep doing this. We do want to keep doing this.
Yeah,
Having
people
a
asking
blast.
about the ship. It's all in my predictions video. I talk extensively about like each of the major story threads that are happening. Yeah, there might be some kind of big battle, even maybe or maybe not related to the ship, but it's definitely going to be between Will and Mathis. It would be interesting if it does include the ship somehow, like somehow the prisoners find the ship before the survivors do, and they request Will in exchange for the ship. Essentially, they want to kill Will for revenge and give the ship in exchange, but I wouldn't trust them in that situation. No, I think the ship might only come up towards the end. I get the feeling this is going to be a lot longer than we are used to. Like a good double length of what other episodes have been.
I think it kind of has to be. They've got a lot of loose ends to tie together.
Yeah.
And then I'm wondering if they aren't adding some of the visual enhancements that they've been doing in survival mode. In fact, I know Raphael just released some pictures of some of the fog and shadow work they're doing, and they updated all the train stuff. Who knows, maybe they're going through and they're doing that too. That
when
way
did they do that?
Oh, I can share with you later. I've got some pictures. But
Yeah,
they did some enhancements on the fog and shadows with color, and that was kind of cool.
Is this for the visual update?
Visual update, yes.
Oh, I think that's only for survival. I don't think that's for Wintermute.
But what I'm saying is, I'm wondering if it's taking them a while. Maybe they're implementing some of this so that they want this to go out with a big bang. Maybe they're going back through and they're adding this stuff. We don't know. I mean, we won't know until it hits.
Oh, I found it. Yeah. Finalizing some very cool visual enhancements. Yeah, this is definitely for the visual update.
So,
looks good. Yeah. Looks like mostly the muskeg here in these pictures. Yeah. That's exciting. It would be nice to have Wintermute updated, but we'll see.
We won't know till we know.
Yeah. Anything else? Anyone have any questions about side quests? We've got like, I think last time we talked about the lake gunshots from episode 2, but we didn't get to cover side quests at all. We got the Tall Tales. We've got the Joplin's Bunker Raid. Anyone have any?
I forgot
more
about the
questions?
Joplin one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be the one. You cannot transfer gear you collect for Will in episode to use in episode 4. Shame. Yeah. But a lot of games do that to you.
It would have been nice when you collect the hard case in episode 4. Spoilers, it's been out for years. You can get your notes at the very least, because all of those lore notes from episode 1 and 2 are gone. It would be really cool if you can get those back at the end of episode 4.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you have to keep a save file for episode 2. Like if I want a screenshot of that of a note from episode 2, I need to load up a save from episode 2 to get that. Otherwise, I can't use. It's not in episode 4. What's this about a ghost stag? So that's part of the Tall Tales side quest. There's 4 like legends that are were spread around, rumors essentially, and there's books that you can find for each of them. The ghost stag is basically just an albino deer that you can find, and it's one of the tall tales that you can read about.
Yeah, one is about a large fish in Pensive Pond.
Fish. I think
the other one is about Sasquatch, and I forget what the last one's about.
The cave, the glowing cave.
Yeah.
It's
the similar stories of like the one that just popped in my head, but it'd be like the Jersey Devil or Chupacabra, things like that. Folklore,
rumors, cryptids, that sort of thing. And you cannot kill it. I looked it up on the wiki when I was researching it. And you cannot kill the ghost stag. Those tall tales are interesting because they give you some really good items. The Lost Cave is the better one. the best one to do in my opinion, because you get the moose satchel, but I don't know how useful that's going to be. And hopefully, if you do have that in episode 3, actually, how would that work? If you get it in episode 3 as Astrid, the moose satchel, and then you jump ahead to episode 5 and play as Astrid, do you have it? Does it just assume you got it, or what? Because it might not be the same save file. I don't know how that's going to work. But yeah, that gives you a moose satchel, and then I think the fish one is just a big fish. It's a big fish.
Yeah.
But you can use that for the survivors because they need
And
food.
every family has that uncle or grandfather that had the big fish story. So
Yeah. I think it's
We all
named
know
Big
that one.
Eddie. I was just looking at it because I wrote a script for the Sasquatch one. And the next one is the fish one. I think the fish is called Big Eddie.
yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely do the side quests in episode 3. They're very good. I don't know about episode 1 side quests are not that interesting. It's
No, but
mostly
they do tell a lot of stuff. Though.
Yeah,
and that was the thing.
Yeah, there's like mini notes from some of the survivors in Milton.
Mhm.
Same with episode 2. It's just survivors leaving caches around, and there's a note with those caches.
So when Toasty and Jitwire and I were talking about all of this and doing the lore and the story and all that stuff, we went back to play it because for me, I was a little off on it, and Toasty was very adamant about it. It's like, do all the side quests, do all the things, and I kind of played it from a different perspective, and I think there's a group of us out there that when we play the games, you've got your blinders on and you're kind of focused on the main story, and you don't do some of the side stuff, and I think you miss out on that stuff, and I've got to remember to be better about that when Black Frost comes out. I got to be inquisitive.
Oh,
Got to
yeah.
be, hey, what's up here? And I tend to, as much as I want to be that person, I'm horrible about it. And so I've got to open my mind up when Black Frost comes out. And
When Black Frost drops, I am playing solo, and I am taking my time finding every piece of lore.
yeah, we have to.
I'm not going to bother
We
with the
have to.
co-op until I'm done with the lore. And then same with episode 5. I'm gonna take my time. I'm gonna be streaming that and taking my time to find
Well,
everything.
you've got to
that I can find.
scrutinize everything that you can pick up at that point. So yeah, I get it. And then that's the thing that I feel like I missed out on, and I can see it here in some of the questions that people are asking about. And that is, these people did kind of the same thing. They missed out on some of the nuance and detail because you're playing the game and you're kind of playing the main quest. And then I know it can be frustrating because sometimes you will play these games and you'll go on these honeydew trips or busy work, and it can be like, oh my God, I got to walk from point A to point P to point C and back to point A and da 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 da. But the problem is if you don't do that, you miss out on little details.
Mm-hmm.
So
Castle asks, do I think we'll see the Force Talkers in episode 5? Maybe. They might get mentioned at the end of episode 4 in the mine. They leave a note that's kind of alarming, that they're planning something big, and I think they've been doing it. They've been causing havoc around the island, messing with Briar House. They caused an avalanche in Pleasant Valley. They have dynamite stored in the mine. It's possible that they might be running around still thinking they're trying to save the world, and they're not aware of what's happening. So maybe we actually run into Forest Stalkers physically in episode 5, or maybe
you do
they
kind of
just
have
get
that
mentioned
run in
again.
with the one at Mystery Lake
Mhm.
too. So
Yeah. You don't see
Yeah.
them, but yeah, you talk to them.
you have that deal.
Hmm.
And it would make sense that there would be somewhat of a disconnect because it's kind of like what you were talking about at the end of this episode with Astrid. She finally comes to the realization that there's something happening
Yeah,
beyond
it's not just a power
yeah,
outage and random auroras. It's straight up the end of the world.
There's something
Not everyone's aware
big
of it.
happening,
Hmm.
and it's not trickled down yet.
Of all the things in this game, the Force Talkers coming back in Black Frost would actually make sense. It's a possibility.
I can
'Cause
see
I don't
that.
I don't think it's tied. Is it tied to Great Bear Island, or
I could
is
see
this
them
like
being a
a
faction of a bigger group too. You know, like if they were
Mhm.
like take something on, and I'm saying this as example. Please don't not verbatim, but somebody like Greenpeace or something along that lines. Like they're a
Mhm.
faction of a bigger entity.
The wiki does say they're natives of Great Bear Island, and their headquarters is at the Honey Lodge. It might just be this one
It
group,
might be local.
but we might see something similar on the
Yeah.
mainland. There's always room for that. I don't think much from the first game will get mentioned in the second one. So I know, people are always asking, like, are we going to see references to Will or Astrid, or what happens at Black Rock? Or I don't think so. I think the sequel is meant to be its own thing, and Wintermute is supposed to be a self-contained story. But what happens in Wintermute, we will know. We will carry over that knowledge into the second game.
Yeah, Black Frost is going to be its own story.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be its own thing. They might have heard stuff about what happened, or maybe a survivor that's there or something along that line.
Yeah, maybe
they may hear stories.
Because it looks like Harmon's on the coast, so maybe they see the big ship passing by, the one that we see, that we're gonna see in episode 5. Or maybe a similar type of deal where there's like a different ship carrying survivors from one place to the other. Looks like Jetwire's back.
I am also back. Yes,
Welcome.
finally. You made
Welcome
it.
back.
Thank you.
We told everybody you were quiet because you had an incident happen at the house, and everything is fine.
Oh,
but we didn't want to
whatever.
share any real details unless you wanted to share. So
Yeah, so there was a car crash in front of my house, and one of the cars went into my yard. So I needed to go make sure everyone was okay and talk to the police and all of that. So yes, everything's fine. Everyone who was in the crash is fine. So
Okay, Cupcake
yeah.
saying Rudiger fanatics in Lone Dark 2. I don't. No, probably not. Because
that's
again,
50
even
years ago.
Yeah, even the
or
Tales,
30 years
that
ago,
is
whatever.
that is a self-contained thing that isn't going to have a huge effect on Wintermute. It might be connected in a way, but I don't think we're going to see details from the Tales come up at all. The way I see it, the Tales are knowledge for us to know. That way, that Wintermute makes more sense.
Yeah, history of the island, so to speak, or
Yeah.
I'm thinking along the lines, and I still think a lot of the things we're seeing with this are this is Hinterland testing to see, hey, if we do something like this, how does the community react? If we do this, how does the community react? Because, and I think you and I both kind of agree on this, that this new entity is not going to be a story mode and a survival mode. It's going to be a survival RPG. So sort of like, Fallout 76 or one of the Fallout games or whatever, where you're going to have stories within the greater world, and you can either do them or not or whatever, but it's going to be an intertwined.
Explore, survive, do the story, whatever you want in whatever order.
It'll be a lot easier for them to write, and it'll be a lot easier for them to add new content if it's all intertwined.
You might want to tweak the bot a little bit there, because Cupcake got flagged for excessive symbol use.
Yeah.
I don't think that's.
We'll definitely have to do that.
It was 5, I think. I don't think that's warranted. Bad bot.
Yeah.
Very bad bot. Yeah, I know. In my chat, some people they go crazy with the emotes, but that's different. They're not spamming it; they're just using it as part of their comments.
It's stupid. It just sees things and reacts. So.
Yeah, he definitely needs edited a little bit, especially for like caps and stuff like that. Like I noticed he gets a little excessive. Like, okay,
we've toned him down on some things, though. We've managed to fix him on, he's not endlessly spamming stuff, and he is doing the right job when those people that we have listed to say, welcome, go check them out. It's doing that, but we definitely need to look at this thing with the symbols and the caps for sure. So, at any rate.
Yeah,
Jetwire, you might as well ask all your questions because you've been involved in An event.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. I don't even know what to ask because I feel like I've missed so much of the conversation.
Well,
Um,
anything about episode 3, obviously. With Molly and all that, but giving
might
you an
have gone.
opportunity to speak up.
Oh, she cut out.
Uh-oh.
Oops.
There you are.
It's just not meant to be today.
I guess. God, you're hard to keep on.
I know. But no, I wanted to ask. So Molly's husband, had he been there the whole time, or did he leave and like come back?
You mean
Yeah, because
Like-
the language is kind of ambiguous. It almost made it feel like he had left for a while, and then whenever he came back, and that's when she kind of retaliated.
no? I don't think he would have left. I don't know for any reason. I mean, maybe to go to the town, but I doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
You know
No.
what let me throw a theory out at you, because we talked about this with the locked door. There could have been times where he would disappear for a day or two doing whatever,
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
and then she would be locked in the house. So she may have been a prisoner in that sort, but he always came
Yeah.
home. So it could be
Gotcha.
something along that lines, maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was just wondering because, like I said, the language was kind of ambiguous and not really specific. It didn't seem like if he was just out or if he left for a
Mhm.
period of time and then came back. So yeah, I was just curious.
I mean, it was early winter, I guess. So
Mm-hmm.
the man probably doesn't have much to do when there's no apples growing in his orchard.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
His
Probably-
Timberwolf infested orchards.
Yeah, probably drinking at the community hall. I don't know what they would do there. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know.
Well, he was definitely out doing community service. We all know he was a wonderful, outstanding
Yeah.
man.
Mm-hmm. He was outside because the wolves don't spawn indoors. No,
Yeah.
Fluffy.
I mean, that's when he would have been attacked. I think both him and Molly were out. They must have been hunting or something, and then the wolves attacked.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Castle, yeah, did bring up. They hope they don't see anything about the tails come up. I don't think we will. We won't hear mention of Rudiger's machine, the Links of Mine, none of that. But we will probably see an iteration of that machine because that would make a lot of sense. And
So
then,
Yeah.
Pierre said he was going to the community hall to play bingo.
got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Dang, he didn't bring her along. They could have made more. They could have made
E5.
double money.
B5.
I think it would be cool though if the Tales does tie in some way. Like
It-
I understand people not
does.
wanting to see it, but
does. Some way, but direct mentions of what we see in survival, I don't think we're going to see in Wintermute. Because
Mhm.
I think it's supposed to be one of those stories that only we know, and Will and Astrid and everyone else, they're not going to know it. They're going to
Yeah.
have to piece together what they see, essentially. But we already know it because we've gone through it in survival. The origins, it's kind of like there's two halves of the story, and the second half hasn't been revealed quite yet. There are some
Mhm.
hints to it. But the first half, the Rudiger half, I think is completely disconnected from the second half, the Perseverance half.
Mhm.
But it's all connected. There's a common origin point to it all.
I would also
Mhm.
think that survival mode takes place sometime after
Yeah, it does.
the story.
Yeah.
You know, that you even though you're playing the Will and Astrid characters, th- things have gone. Things have changed because you don't have any of these survivors. You don't have any of these people.
Actually, we are technically not Will or Astrid. I think Raphael did confirm that. We are not canonically them.
You're just
Which
picking those
opens-
characters.
Yeah, I think because the assets are already there, they're using them.
Just makes it easier.
Yeah. What happens in survival mode is the story of our character, us, essentially.
Yeah.
Discovering, the mysterious signal fire, running into the cougar, collecting all the notes, discovering everything with the tails,
Which
Sutherland's
then again
tail and all
gets
that.
back to us talking about how when TLD2 Black Frost comes out,
Mhm.
there's going to be this whole branch of stories. One thing's going to lead to another. You're going to find this note, and it's going to lead you to go to here. And I'm hoping they really sit down and get some good writing, and piece together something amazing.
Elijah's mentioned he went into struggle mode with the rifle at Molly's feet, yelling, "Shoot the damn wolf!" Yeah, she had a rifle. I think it was already in her hand. She mentioned she was there with the rifle, and she just didn't shoot because she couldn't. She froze up. But I think it's because of her resentment. She wanted to just be rid of him. I think what happened was his rifle exploded when he shot it at the wolves, and that's why he was overwhelmed. Because you find a blown up rifle in her house. It's
That's
likely
right.
what
Yeah,
happened.
yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah.
Although, if she also had a rifle, I don't know what happened to that rifle. I don't remember if she mentions a rifle in her hand. It might have been the revolver, actually, that was in the basement. Oh, no, she did have a rifle. Yeah, there is a second one.
Yeah, because
Wait, okay.
well, Astrid
now,
gets a pistol, doesn't she?
Yeah, now I'm confused, because she went out, she got upset at Astrid. Did she take the rifle with her? And then went to the barn? Where was the rifle when... Okay, never mind. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. Because it sounds like she had the rifle with her when she went to the barn and then got overrun by wolves, but where did that rifle go? I don't know. Maybe she left it like in the porch area outside. I don't know.
Yeah, that's plausible. She could have set it down and then got away from it and everything, but
Yeah. I have a question for Elijah. So Elijah said, at Castle, I was scared to death of the bear at Echo 1 in Bleak. There's a bear at the radio tower in Bleak Inlet? I haven't seen that one yet.
Oh, no.
No.
Well, you only need to go there once.
Yeah, you need to go there once, but I have been there and I haven't seen a bear, so what is this bear?
I don't know.
Oh, no.
I feel like I run into a new bear spawn every 6 months at least. I'm still running into new ones.
Yeah.
Some of my viewers are talking about how I ran into a moose the other day. It's the moose at Skeeter's Ridge.
Oh, yeah, that one.
It got me live. It was not fun. Didn't explain this. Oh, in the parking lot? That sucks. Because that's a really small space.
Yeah, that is.
You can move your way through one car to another, but yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. Oh no. I'm gonna have to keep an eye out for that one.
Cupcake said, I didn't explain when I said Fanatics at the end of Last Horizon. Rudiger transmitted the data to someone, and I was wondering if someone picked up the progress of Rudiger's project. Yeah. I don't think Fanatic is the right word, for sure. It's just someone. But we still don't know who got it. But if Rudiger's machine is tied to whatever's happening in Perseverance Mills, someone got their hands on it. What I think is happening is somewhat similar to like an Umbrella Corporation type situation. Not quite zombie apocalypse Umbrella, but like the corporation doing some kind of shady stuff essentially in the background. And there's the John Industries that's mentioned at the end of Last Horizon. That's their employer. That was the employer for everyone involved in the project. And then in the files, there's an ID card for some unknown character. It's unused, but it mentions some like strange institute. I forgot what it's called. Let me see if I can find it. It's on the collectibles tab. But I think the character's name is Naomi Moore. Oops, I clicked on something else. Naomi Moore. It's an ID card. Affiliate Researcher Institute for New Awakenings, which also makes you question. Oh, never mind. Yeah, it makes you question what's the deal with this new awakenings thing. Apparently in the wiki it says it's related to the Dark Walker. Never mind. But it appears to be related to the Escape the Dark Walker, but it cannot be found listed in game files as Dark Walker ID. Huh?
What?
That's so weird. But yeah, Institute of New Awakenings makes me question what's going on with that. And we know that what Rudiger's machine was doing has to do with the brain and sleeping and stuff like that. So like, is that related? It might just be John Industries again. Oh yeah, and don't Dark Walker, not canon. So we don't need to worry about that.
It's
I
folklore.
don't want people freaking out. Yeah, it's folklore. I should add the Dark Walker to the series then. I need to update my script.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about that. Simply because of the tales, like a lot of them, mention like a dark figure and stuff like that. So I was wondering if maybe.
We can talk about the tales one day for sure, but yeah, there's a patient interview that one of the patient says that they saw like a dark figure. And someone in a comment a long time ago made note that both the protagonist voice actors are the voice actors of the Mass Effect series. They're female and male Shepard.
Yeah.
And Raphael or someone at Hinterland's a huge fan of Mass Effect. So they commented saying that the dark figure mentioned in the patient interview may be a reference to the dark oily figures that indoctrinated people would see in the Mass Effect series. Indoctrination theory is like some weird rabbit hole, but basically the Reapers, I think it's the Reapers. I don't know too much about Mass Effect. Would try to use
Reapers
some sort of.
Is the correct.
Can you want to explain how indoctrination theory works?
I don't know if I can explain it, but it's
like mind control adjacent, but they're trying to convince you to join their side. And so eventually, if you become indoctrinated, you would start seeing and hearing hallucinations, and sometimes you'd see the dark, oily figures. That I believe is an Easter egg to Mass Effect, the dark figure that the patient sees in their dream.
That makes sense.
When you go down the rabbit hole of indoctrination theory, a lot of what you see in the dream sequences that the patient 7 sees makes a lot of sense. It's creepy. Yeah. And I think it's a lot of it has to do with Mass Effect. It's just references to Mass Effect and in indoctrination theory. But it makes sense because they're definitely huge fans of Mass Effect.
Yeah,
of course they have
I'm a fan. I like
the two voice actors leading the first 3 games are the protagonists of this game, which is very cool.
Mark Meir and I forget the lady's name.
Jennifer Hale.
Yeah, Jennifer Hale. But yeah, that whole thing with Sovereign and the indoctrination and Mass Effect. Yeah, I'd have to go back and play it. I bought the new trilogy. I played it. It's a lot of time.
Isn't the Dark Walker a space entity? I don't know, because the Dark Walker's not canon, so I don't really worry too much about it. The Dark Walker's basically just the Long Dark's version of Slenderman. That's what it is. Because you got to look for the glyphs to banish the Dark Walker, essentially, versus finding the pages for the Slenderman. I think it's a supernatural entity, essentially. It's like a ghost or demon or something. But yeah, I don't bother with that because it's not canon. But I might talk about it because it's mystery. It's mystery adjacent, which is what I'm working on with the Tall Tales series. I'm working on talking about not only the Tall Tales, but also other mysteries in the game. I think the Dark Walker kind of fits in that.
You could make that a footnote in that. That the Dark Walker is part of that.
And this video is not canon. We're talking about non-canon stuff here, but we're just doing it for fun. We shall see. I have yet to start the actual recording, so I still have time to edit the scripts.
Time for amends. Edits.
Reapers use it to weaken the mind to join them and help them, bring them to save all life. But it was to end life and make more of them and repeat. Yeah. I do want to play Mass Effect someday. Blind. And that's going to be a backseat nightmare. I'm sure.
No.
Yeah. Just turn chat off.
Mhm.
Just have them watch. It's really good. If you've never played it,
Mhm.
it's amazingly good. It's got a lot of little side quests and all that
believe
stuff.
I have the trilogy.
It will draw you in and frustrate you to no end. But it is really good. It's really good. My favorite's the second one out of the three. Third one's good. The ending was frustrating, as you probably have read. But
I have Mass Effect Legend Edition.
yeah, that's all
Edition. Is
three.
that all three?
With all the
good.
DLCs and everything.
Good, yeah.
I
I
ended
will
up buying
definitely
that
play
one
that
on
someday.
sale, but I have yet to play it because that one's got the enhanced graphics and everything on it. But it's good.
Mhm.
It's a good story. It's a good IP. There's a lot of amazing things about it. But yeah, it'll suck you in for quite a bit of time. But that would be a good one to stream.
Yeah.
But you're just going to have to either turn chat down or tell everybody, hey, no
Might have to
spoilers.
actually get some paid moderators potentially to start
Yeah.
drop kicking people from the chat if they need
Yeah.
to.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be fun. It'd be a
Any
fun time because it's similar to like Fallout, where you can play a good guy or you can play a jerk, so to speak. So
any final thoughts here? Questions, concerns? We're gone for an hour and a half now.
exactly,
Yeah.
and I think it is quieted down enough that we could probably wrap things up.
Yep.
Eldritch Space Demon.
Maybe we can have a discussion about Mass Effect one day. We can get off the Survivor thing a little bit, and we'll get everybody on. We'll have a big talk about.
Yeah,
about
I wonder
it.
if playing through those, you'll see some influences for the Long Dark.
Now that you've mentioned that, that's why it's like, ooh, I should go play. I
Yeah,
want to see some influences here.
maybe some weird quirks about the Long Dark make sense if you play Mass Effect, because they definitely seem to be huge fans of it and might be definitely throwing in some Easter eggs. I think the whole the weird nightmares definitely seems indoctrination theory adjacent.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, chicken jockey, no, please, no. Oh no, Daniel has infected the chat with Minecraft.
No. Not Minecraft. Even though it's a survival game. It's all about digging a hole.
Disappointed in Daniel. I am very disappointed in Daniel as well.
All right, I think we are probably at the end of this. Jitwire, I don't know if you want to take the time to say goodbye, even though you weren't hardly here. But if you want to take us out, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all so very much for joining us. We hope to see you on the next one. We really appreciate it. Bye-bye.